This is it. Is love truly blind? Will they say I do? Or will they say I don't at the altar? Stop zooming in awkwardly. Sorry guys, I hired the production crew from season 2 of Love is Blind apparently. What's going on everyone? James here with another real review and recap of Love is Blind Season 2. Today we're talking all about the finale. If you missed all of my reviews and recaps, guys, you're going to want to find them floating around at the top of the screen or in the description below. It's been a fun season so far, I would say, after we got out of the pods. And yeah, everything from that point on has been either a hot mess or it's been pretty good. Now our remaining engaged couples are Nick and Danielle, Deepti and Shake, Shane and Natalie, Mallory and Salvador, and Jarrette and Iyanna. So going into this week, they kick us off with Danielle and Nick's wedding ceremony. Danielle has already said, I do, but does Nick say I do as well? Now before we get into my review and recap, guys, I just want to let y'all know there are time codes down below because we're going to start off with a spoiler-free discussion and then we're going to get right into spoilers just in case someone hasn't seen the episode yet. Now before we do get into the discussion, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies and TV like this all the time. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and stay subscribed. Tap that bell because my review of The Batman drops next Monday. Yeah, I've seen it. And hey, get out down below in the comments and let me know what you thought of this episode as well. What were your most surprising moments from the finale? Because guys, some of us were right, and some of us were really wrong. Alrighty y'all, let's get right into my spoiler-free thoughts, and hey, it's all about wedding day. And usually in Love is Blind, the wedding ceremonies are probably the most entertaining because part of you thinks you know what's going to happen and part of you doesn't, so the pacing here was naturally just much better, and I think this episode was probably the most engaging episode yet. Like I mentioned, there were some surprises and there were some moments where I thought I knew what was going to happen and it actually didn't work out. Of course, I'm not going to spoil just yet what happened, but I will tell you that there were some weird buildups to those more surprising moments. I mean, I was surprised here, like watching it, but in the show itself there were some weird build-ups to certain answers from either the bride or the groom. So I almost don't know if they were rushing along in this episode when they maybe could have taken a little bit longer to play up the suspense and drama. And there are also a lot of moments where I feel like they kind of lean into less pop songs, more of the natural score from the season, but they get into the soundtrack a little bit too much, and the weird pop songs, again, they just awkwardly destroy any sort of tension within moments. And even though I made a joke about it in the beginning of this episode, guys, there were some really weird extreme close-ups at times. The production value for season 2 anyway has been really bad, I would say. Unfortunately, it's a drop off from season 1. There are some shots that are framed awkwardly, things that are out of focus. I mean, gosh, even here, there's this weird extreme close-up on Shake's shoe. Tapping and like shaking. Like, I get it, it's supposed to add to the fact that Shake is nervous, but we can do that without it being a very weird cutaway from Shake speaking and then his literal shoe. I was thinking, what are we looking at here? Now, to avoid any sort of spoilers, I won't talk about what happens at the altar here, but I will tell you that I wish we got more time at the ceremonies where the weddings did work out. Some couples that I've been rooting for worked out, so I wanted to see them celebrate, but they put all of the celebrations in a very quick, short, and not very impactful montage at the end of this episode. It's like they were rushing for the finish line here. So maybe they spent a little bit too much time in the previous episode, in episode 9, where that could have been like part 1 of weddings, and episode 10 could have been part 2. I think that would have given us more time with some of these couples, but instead they do kind of just sprint all the way to the end. But something that you might not have caught if you just exited out of the actual video itself on Netflix is the fact that there is a new episode coming March 4th. So I'm guessing this is going to be a reunion episode similar to what they did with season 1. Of course, we don't know about these after the altar episodes. That'll come whenever they come, but I do think a reunion episode is going to be interesting, most notably because of Shayna, Kyle, Shane, Natalie, and all these other couples that kind of had these riffs all season long. So yeah, that's about all I'll say, because I was about to give away a spoiler, so maybe this is a good time to transition to spoilers. Again, y'all, this is the spoiler discussion, so yes, we're talking about the weddings themselves, starting off with Nick and Danielle. Now we know Danielle's already said I do, but the question was, will Nick say I do or I don't? And will that man, someone get him a tissue or a napkin or a handkerchief? Gosh, you gave it to Sal, you can't give it to Nick? But after a little bit of build up, Nick eventually says I do to begin today's episode. Now I really do hope they can work out how to grow together and kind of work through some of these unresolved issues. There are a lot of problems between them, unfortunately, but it seems like they're willing to work through it together, so all power to them. I really do hope it works out. And if anything, I just know that Nick was ready to get out of that sun. Alrighty guys, so let's move on to the second wedding that was showcased here, and that is Deepti and Shake. So at this point, we're 1 for 1 with our couples. What will happen between Deepti and Shake? At the beginning of their sort of montage that they were playing, it seemed like they were editing everything together in a very sweet and endearing manner. I loved Shake's parents being supportive and Deepti's parents being supportive. It just seemed like everything was going to work out. But then we get to the part where Shake is still telling his friends that he's not physically attracted to Deepti. And guys, I'm sorry, but this is not, to me, this doesn't sit well in my spirit. This is not right. You should not be telling your friends you're not attracted to your fiance that you're about to go and, I guess, walk down the altar with. It just seemed to me that Shake was still possibly leaning into the I need the physical attraction over the emotional connection portion of this day. And it made me feel icky because as he's saying these things, they're cutting to Deepti, her dress looks great, and then they go back to Shake and he says, well, he could go either way right now. So to me, that just spelled trouble, but we do get them walking down the altar, we get the ceremony, the traditional Indian ceremony, but I think that they did cut down on the ceremony itself because you'd have to imagine there was a bit more, but for time purposes, they wanted to get right to the do you or don't you want to take this person to be the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. I gotta get better at that. But after a very quick cut to both of them at the altar, they ask Deepti, do you take Shake to be your husband? And she says no, but it was a very quick cut. I mean, there was no build up here. She said no, and then she followed it up with she needs someone that is sure about her for the rest of her life. And you know what? I don't blame her. And the reason I say that is because right after Deepti said no, Shake had really no remorse. Maybe he was in shock, but then the minute he said to the crowd, this is still a celebration, and that he was gonna go to dinner reservations at Nobu on Sunday, I'm like, listen bro, this is clearly not affecting you, and you probably were hoping she would have said no. So it just made me like Shake a little bit less, to be honest with you, but I do hope the best for Deepti. And you know, she had that conversation with her mom, and her mom reassured her feelings that you need to find someone who's sure about you. And of course, before they move on to the next wedding, they kind of let Shake get the final word, and he said, well, if I would have said yes, she would have said yes. Like, you're being really egotistical, dude, so well, that reunion's gonna be interesting. Alrighty, y'all, so we're 1 for 2. Now let's move on to Shane and Natalie, a wedding that I'm sure we're all very interested in. Now they open up their segment with a very, very dramatic angle where unfortunately, Natalie was the recipient of Shane's very hurtful words. Now again, we don't know exactly what went down in that argument, but as this segment went on, we learned a little bit more about what Shane said to Natalie, and whether Shane had been drunk or not. He told Natalie that he hates her and that he's basically not, I guess, looking forward to marrying her, and Natalie was hurt by it. And he also added that Natalie was the worst thing for him. Like, wow, you're gonna say all that before your wedding day? And of course, this is where they sprinkle in the corny pop songs, but I just don't think that they were both thrilled after that conversation at the thought of getting married. And somehow, some way, Shane said I do at the altar, and Natalie said that she can't. But she didn't want to close the door right away. She kind of wanted to continue their relationship and work through some issues, because she even said there are some things we have to work through, some real issues. And Shane was not very open to that. He essentially was saying, no, I don't want to continue this, without saying, no, I don't want to continue this. And it actually broke my heart a bit, because Natalie's dad, so sweet, was so supportive, and you can just tell that Natalie was looking forward to hopefully getting married to Shane. But Natalie's mom, she knew something. And y'all know what moment I'm talking about, when the parents sit down right before their kids walk up to the altar, and then Natalie's mom looks at Shane's mom and essentially says with her eyes, I know what your son said to my daughter. And I'm like, oh, this is so messy. But honestly, that argument must have been awful, and I do feel for Natalie, because no woman should ever be told by their fiance or husband-to-be that they are hated and that they're the worst thing for them. So yeah, that again is going to be something they'll address in the reunion episode, I'm so sure of. It's just, I guess our feelings about Shane from the beginning were maybe a little bit justified in terms of us thinking he was immature and unfortunately just really not ready for marriage. And yeah, that's kind of showcasing itself here. Alrighty, so let's get into Mallory and Salvador. We are going on a losing streak right now with our engaged couples, guys. Will Mallory and Salvador break the streak? I'd love to say yes, but guys, unfortunately, Salvador says no to Mallory, and I say unfortunately because I genuinely thought that they were going to work out. Even Mallory mentions after the wedding ceremony that if Salvador would have said yes, she probably would have said I do as well. But the entire buildup was very ominous in tone. I think that it was weird that Mallory's parents and brothers couldn't make the wedding, but of course maybe they had something else to do, and even Sal's parents just not there. So it was a very odd build-up, and things were just not necessarily lining up exactly how I thought they would. And hey, there was also a mariachi band, so that's not terrible. But I genuinely didn't expect Sal to say no. I thought he was really crazy about Mallory, to the point where he would say I do, but Sal's reasoning was that he was unsure about whether to even continue a relationship with Mallory after this. I just don't know if I see it, and Mallory must have known because it seemed like she was almost okay with it, but I would imagine, you know, off camera, Mallory was a little heartbroken. But the producers were messy. They cut together some footage right before the actual ceremony of Mallory and Jarrette talking together, and I'm like, y'all stop trying to make this happen. Don't take away the it couple for me this year, okay? Because Mallory and Iyanna, like, I want to see them win, so they kept trying to push that angle, but yeah, I just don't think that's happening. But I do genuinely believe that Mallory would have said yes. It's just, wow, so surprising to see that they didn't work out either. So after 3 straight no's at the altar, will Jarrette and Iyanna break the streak? So guys, let's dive into their wedding segment. Now it begins with Iyanna just honestly looking great. All her makeup, the dress, like her hair, it just looked great. Now I was a little curious to see how they would handle this segment in terms of the editing, and they definitely made it seem like Jarrette was resorting to some childish tendencies when there was a moment where Iyanna tells the interviewer, I just told Jarrette not to get drunk at the wedding or whatever, and Jarrette, you know, reiterates that to us, and Jarrette essentially starts drinking with his friends, but it was probably one drink. He probably wasn't drunk, so they definitely got me because in that moment I was a little mad at Jarrette. And they kept harping on the fact that Jarrette has to give up his single lifestyle of clubbing and partying. And when you couple all of that with Iyanna's parents really not being as, I would say, thrilled about this entire process, yeah, I definitely thought someone was saying I don't. But I did love to see that Iyanna, her mother and father were praying together. I thought that was a beautiful moment. And then we start to get to the wedding ceremony itself, and for some reason I felt a little bit better about them. I just saw the genuine feelings and emotions coming from both Iyanna and Jarrette, and they eventually say I do. So yes, we finally get an I do after 3 I don'ts, because man, I was getting worried because y'all said in the comments last week I don't see any of them getting married, and when I saw Nick and Danielle get married, I'm like, okay, that's an outlier. We care about the other 3. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, I was really curious to see what would happen with Iyanna and Jarrette because they are my it couple this season. I thought we wouldn't have one, but yes, I wanted them to actually persevere. They were my number 1, and they did it. So I really do pray that their marriage is plentiful, it's beautiful, it's full of joy, and I hope they can get over some of the issues because it looks like Iyanna, even before this ceremony, was a little bit reserved, but we'll see what happens, especially during the reunion episode. You can just tell that they're going to frame it that this is the happy couple, right? And then everyone else. And then we get to the part of the episode that I actually really didn't like, where they just end with a cutaway to all the weddings that didn't work out. There's a little bit of resentment in Deepti's tone, and then we get some ceremony footage for about 2 minutes. I'm like, y'all, you need to do much better at the end. So I think that Iyanna and Jarrette's wedding was a good ending note, but when it comes to the actual production at the end, I thought it was just way too rushed. But there you have it, guys. That's season 2 of Love is Blind. Iyanna and Jarrette said I do. Nick and Danielle made it out there. Everyone else, unfortunately, well, didn't work out. Now, I do wonder about Natalie and Shane. That's the only couple that I'm wondering if that door is even slightly creaked open. I can see them reaching out to one another and trying to rekindle that. But for Natalie's sake, of course, if Shane doesn't show signs of actually growing, she never ever should hear those hurtful words from a man ever again. So Natalie girl, we're riding with you, so we definitely support you, but I am curious again to see next week's episode, the reunion, and I just don't know what the heck they're going to talk about. I'd imagine they bring in some drama, right? But I'm curious to see how these couples kind of withstand some of those questions, because you know they're diving deep into that bag of mess. So there you have it, y'all. That's my review and recap of episode 10 of Love is Blind. Again, if you missed out on any of my reviews and recaps, you got them in the description below, where they were floating around at the top top of the screen. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I want to say we'll be back for next week's Love is Blind reunion episode, if that's indeed what it is. So go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. Stay in tune with what we got going on. Movies and TV, news galore. My gosh, I am literally, my head is spinning at so much of what we have coming up on the channel this year. And if you haven't already, get loud down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of this episode and which moments made you the happiest. Let's end on an optimistic note. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.